Right. That means if you're watching this, I've posted it to YouTube. And if I've posted it to YouTube, that means I haven't had time to edit it. So what you're about to get is a 20 odd minute podcast about the photograph, followed by a podcast that we're recording now that isn't due out for 2 weeks about where RTD went wrong. So if you want to stick around and watch the whole thing, you'll be able to see that before it goes out on the audio feed. On the other hand, you are watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about Paul McGann's chin, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And Steve's frozen already. So Steve may join us, or he may not. And indeed, Ryan may join us, or he may not, but Ryan's having problems with his router. So.
But Steve's frozen in a position of such interest.
Well, Steve's frozen in the position he always sits in, so it's difficult to tell.
It's the thinker. It's Rodin, isn't it? It's the thinker.
Well, yeah, not entirely sure that's quite how I'd phrase it myself, but okay, Steve's back, so let's have him back in, and then we can start talking. If he goes in and out all night, right, Steve, you're back.
I'm so sorry about that. I just
all
lost
you need to do
connection.
for the edit is say, "And I'm Steve," and then we can start.
Yeah, all right. I'm happy to do that.
Are you
Give me a
Steve?
countdown. Oh, no, I'm still all right. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
I don't edit, Steve. You
No.
just need to
All right.
say. I mean, everybody already knows that you're Steve, right?
And I'm Steve. I am.
Yes.
Steve.
Hey.
Steve,
All
Steve.
right.
Steve here.
You didn't want your motivation for the line reading.
No. And I am Steve.
Okay. So the photo turned up. When did the photo turn up? Was it last night?
It turned up just after I was speculating that Paul McGann might come back to Doctor Who, which I suspected.
Did you post it, Matt?
WhatsApp.
Did you post it?
I didn't post it or made it.
Did you wish it hard into existence?
I'm not even that excited by the idea.
Especially if he's wearing that costume, right?
Oh,
Okay.
Terrible.
There are basically two orders of business to do with this. One, do we believe the photo's genuine or a fake? And two, assuming that there is any possibility that it's genuine, what might it mean? In other words, what might they be doing? Because I had a little look around the internet, and the people who think it's real think it's for the 2026 Christmas special. Whereas I really don't think that at all. So I guess we'll get into it. But I mean, the first order of business is, do we think it's real? I saw two people go to AI detectors that you can get online. I mean, these days you can run any photo through an AI detector and it'll tell you whether it thinks it's been made by AI or by human hand. And both of the AI detectors said it had been made by human hand. And in fact, one of them said there was 0% possibility that it had been made by AI. However, I've also seen people point out things like there's a guy standing at the back in the larger version of the photo who looks like he's got two thumbs, and he does. He looks like he's got two thumbs, but it could just be the way the photo's been taken. There's a guy wearing one of the face masks where the angle of the photo makes it look like the strap from the face mask, instead of going round his ear, is going through his ear. But I mean, the angle that he's standing at, that is probably just the shadow of his ear under the light, which is directly above him, and he's got his head tipped forwards. So I don't think that really says anything either. There's Paul McGann. Why would he be wearing the costume basically from the TV movie? Is it the costume from the TV movie? It more or less is, isn't it?
More or
Yeah.
less. He
And
doesn't appear in that in
kind of.
public anymore. Well, he hasn't really ever appeared in that in public. He has occasionally done conventions in the New Zealand-made costume that he commissioned himself.
well, yeah, and also on telly,
Yeah.
he's been a couple of times on telly in the costume that was made for him for 2013 Night of the Doctor. So you would mostly expect him to see him in that costume if he's wearing a costume. Also, Billie Piper's costume, she's wearing trousers.
And
But
she's wearing her 2005 face.
well, she seems to be. I was going to come back to that. I was going to do the faces after the costumes. She's wearing trousers, but it could be that she's wearing trousers because she's on a cold set and they're doing shots from the waist up. And oftentimes actors will wear trousers out of shot if they're not going to be seen wearing those trousers in shot. So that says nothing. You're right. She looks like she did in 2005. But again, it's kind of a low res fuzzy photo.
Yeah.
It's kind of well done. It's well done if it's fake.
Yeah.
My issues aren't necessarily, I don't mind the costume, because if they say to McGann, do you want to come back for X, but you'll have to wear this, he'd probably say yes.
Yeah, the
Guessing.
costume is not going to be the sticking point.
No, well, I have a slight sticking point about there's a sort of an ambiguity about the quality of the photo. It's too good to be a covertly taken photograph, and it's too poor to be a professionally taken photograph. So it would have to be the BBC pretending that this is a covertly taken photograph, and I don't think they've got that kind of Dominic Cummings style brain to
Well,
sort
this
of
is
try to.
I think you have to
drum
bear
up.
in mind you were talking about the AI detector software, but the important thing to remember there is that those are AI. So if AI actually is actively plotting to take over the world, it's just the thing it would say, wouldn't it? It would just say, no, it's not one of mine, Gov. You know, you're
It feels like just really good quality AI
yeah,
to me.
It could just be a simple Photoshop job. That's not AI.
yeah,
That's
that's true. That's
I
true.
don't think it looks remotely photoshopped, though. There are lots of things going on in that photograph that would be really difficult to do. And there are details in there, like the stuff on the table at the back. There are props on the table at the back, right? And I can't imagine that you would put props like that into the photo if they weren't genuine. Or unless an AI was trying to figure out what you'd have on a
Well,
table in the back of a film shot or something.
I mean, a Photoshop wouldn't the difficult things. So the main points of interest in the photograph are Billy Piper, Paul McGann, and the TARDIS console. Everything else could be the original photograph that things are photoshopped over.
Yes.
But
Yes.
photoshopping an older Paul McGann into that original looking costume, photoshopping Billy Piper into a costume that looks a little bit like the Shooty Gatwas, but not quite. I mean, the costumes actually make it more convincing to me.
Because
But
they'd
it
have to
also,
exist in a photo
yeah,
for the photo to be photoshopped,
yeah,
right?
but it actually makes me more convinced it's just a very, very good AI photo that
Mm.
the detectors aren't capable of. Maybe the I mean, AI is updating it all the time, and the detectors have to keep up with that. And as Steve says, slightly apocalyptically, maybe they just haven't kept up enough.
But there are three questions then. Why would an AI Photoshop it into such low res? I don't think I've ever seen that before. I suppose you could ask it to, but it seems odd.
Yeah.
But
It's
the other
AI
two,
messing with your brain, is what it is.
Mm.
well, the other two questions are, I think, the more pertinent ones, because if anything appears in front of me that's questionable, my question is, what's the motivation for it if it's fake? What's the timing as well for it if it's fake? And if it's genuine, how and why are we seeing it? And I think the motivation for it, if it's fake, the timing is odd. You would imagine it would have appeared today rather than yesterday, because this turned up at about 5 o'clock last night or something, wasn't it? I seem to recall getting in from work last night and it just having turned up, but I could be wrong. Was it yesterday or was it this morning? Does anybody
It was
remember?
yesterday. It was yesterday it came out. We
Yeah,
were
it
talking about it
was.
last night.
Yeah, that's right. We were, weren't we? So that's odd timing. If you'd faked it and you were going to put it out this close to the anniversary, wouldn't you smuggle it out on the anniversary? Especially if you wanted people to think, oh, maybe the BBC have leaked it deliberately. So
Have
it
we told
seems,
listeners we're actually recording on the evening of the 23rd? So we're talking about yesterday and today and so on.
no,
It's,
this video will be going out tonight, Steve. So they'll know.
well, they'll know. They'll remember.
But if they're listening to the podcast,
Yeah. Yeah.
They can work it out from what we're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah,
oh,
yeah, that's it.
And the other question, so this is, I think, perhaps the most pertinent question, and I tried to ask it on our WhatsApp thread, and nobody bit. The TARDIS console that's in the photograph, I don't recognize it, but then I'm not a TARDIS console aficionado. I think they all look the same mostly.
It looks
Yeah,
plastic, doesn't it?
yeah.
I don't think it looks good enough for an actual set.
Well, no, that's not my point, John. My point is, if there's a TARDIS console that they're filming on, it would be a TARDIS console that already exists because they are not spending £1 million, £5 million, whatever it would cost, or even if it's been made fairly cheaply, a few £100,000 on a new TARDIS console for something like this. This is, the TARDIS console is an investment that you ameliorate across a season, a couple of seasons. It's not something that you do for a one-off. So my point is, if we don't recognize this TARDIS console, then the TARDIS console is AI generated because no human hand has made that.
There's what if
Yes, there
RTD
are caveats. Yeah.
RTD was tempted to do a story that rolls in all the existing or as many existing TARDIS sets as possible, and there's one missing, which is the Seagal TARDIS console to go with Paul McGann. And for that, I think they would throw together a TARDIS console set so that they've got a set of TARDIS console sets. I mean,
Maybe.
I think it's unlikely because I think
Yeah.
this is AI and that looks like an AI generated TARDIS console. But there are situations where I think they would spend money on building a new set if if a point of the story is that the
But
TARDIS is glitching between different
yeah, but that would
eras.
be a huge expense to go to for just something like that. And I did have a look at a few of the TARDIS consoles, including the Paul McGann one, and this looks more like the Peter Capaldi one. So, I mean, it doesn't really resemble the Paul McGann one at all.
No.
So they've not made it to look like
Paul
the Paul
McGann was
McGann one.
more wood, wasn't it? More wooden
Yeah, it was
kind of
wooden.
practical
It
stuff.
didn't, and the floor is straight out of the Peter Capaldi TARDIS, albeit
Yeah.
Yeah,
in a
I
slightly different arrangement. And the handrails around the outside, they're not from any TARDIS I've seen before.
no, but that's kind of. I'm not suggesting that they would recreate the Seagal set. I'm suggesting that they would create something, a hybrid between one of the new consoles and the McGann console, just for McGann, to give McGann his own console.
But the
But
expense
but
that
the
you'd
expense,
run to
well,
for a
yeah,
few seconds of screen
again,
time
and I
would
go
be.
back to I think this might be, this is just AI.
I'm
Probably,
with Matt.
but
I mean, the timing's wrong for
well, this is the
in JR terms. They won't be necessarily recording a Christmas special now,
No, it's not filming at the
No,
minute.
no, no, no,
right? So that's not practical levels. Billie Piper's got a different face at the moment, as evidenced by the birthday photos she released or were released by Hello today. The hair's different, but that's not necessarily a proof. But I think the face is different as well.
I
But
think you're right about the face. That was the first thing I thought when I looked at
yeah,
it, is that this is
Yeah.
Billie Piper from years ago. But photos can be deceiving.
yeah.
I mean, the other thing is Paul McGann's face. The chin looks way too big and it looks slightly too jowly. But then I went online and looked at various photos of him, and they're all in much higher res. So there's not really a comparison. But there are photos of him where his chin looks bigger. There are photos of him where he looks more jowly. So, it's possible for photographs to lie, especially low res like this.
Has anyone investigated his ring?
No.
Whose
Oh,
ring?
Because
the
he's wearing a Capaldi-like big ring. I don't know. Oh, who knows? I think it's AI.
Yeah,
But there you
probably.
go.
I think there's enough benefit of the doubt that we could give it that we have the second part of the conversation. Why?
Hmm.
What would it be if it is real? Um, Actually, one of the other giveaways that everybody's been saying, oh, Billie Piper's right hand is way bigger than her left hand, entirely failing to spot that actually there's a roundel on the TARDIS wall behind her right hand, and the thing that they think is her right hand is actually the roundel. The hand is the same size as the hand on the left. It's the
Well,
roundel behind that makes it look bigger.
the other thing people have pointed out are the masks that the crew is wearing, but Simon suggested, and I'm inclined because I had the same thought, but I don't
Yeah.
express these thoughts on our WhatsApp thread because Dylan works in the industry, and normally I express these thoughts, and then he goes, no, 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 everybody's maskless, everybody's naked when they're making television these days. It's complete nudity, but it makes sense now in the winter if you're filming with people that are going to be central to your production, if the crew wear COVID masks effectively to stop flu from being spread or people getting ill. So that kind of made sense to me.
Because if a cameraman goes sick with the flu, you can get another cameraman in.
Yeah.
But if the doctor goes sick with the flu, the whole production shuts down,
Yeah.
or they have to run around trying to find something else to do for a week. Okay, I'll throw my theory out, and then I guess we'll discuss. But because when they announced that there was going to be a 2026 Christmas special, I kind of had two thoughts about what it would be. And one of them was what it would entail. And the other thought was, well, that's RTD making sure there's a Christmas special in 2026. And for the past month or whatever it is since we found out, I've been bothered by a thing. And that means that 2025 will be the only Christmas day when RTD's been in charge of Doctor Who, when there won't be new Doctor Who on the telly. And so, ever since we learned about the one thing, I've just been wondering if something would show up this Christmas. Something short, like 5 or 6 minutes, like Time Crash or Born Again. And then, even as I'm thinking about this, they throw out a sort of newly edited version of Born Again on the YouTube channel, almost as if they're saying, get ready for another 5 or 6 minute special later this year
Where'd you put it though?
on Christmas Day.
Yeah, but Christmas Day is absolutely rammed anyway.
No, you
And
put it
it's
on the iPlayer. It's a present to the fans. You don't put it on the telly. You put it on the iPlayer. Or, I mean, or,
would the BBC do something like that?
well, they
Particularly if it's
might do.
coming straight off the back of the last one. I
But
don't know.
John, they might. You and I are both big cricket fans, aren't we?
Yep.
We were talking about earlier. And the BBC are putting out the highlights for the current Ashes series that started and came to a juddering halt the other day. And the highlights on the BBC are going out only on the iPlayer. They're not on one of the main broadcast channels. So it's clearly something they're
Dreamland.
looking at moving towards.
It's possible.
Dreamland
Right.
went
So
out
Yeah,
on the iPlayer.
yeah, yeah.
The five-ish
I think
Doctors
Dreamland would have
reboot
been doing
went
better in
out
that first Test match. Never
on the
mind.
iPlayer. Any number
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Doctor Who shorts have gone out exclusively on the
yeah,
iPlayer or on DVD and Blu-ray in the years since. Would they put it out
yeah.
exclusively on the iPlayer? Yes. Or would they possibly put it on BBC One on Christmas Day? 5 minutes, John. It's not like they're looking for a huge, great slot. 5 minutes. They could squeeze it in if they wanted to. And if they knew that they were making it, so presumably this would have been organised at the same time as RTD settling down to do the Christmas special for 2026. And if he says at the same time, I can also give you 10 minutes of something for Christmas Day 2025, then they would have had, I don't know, a couple of months at least already to find somewhere in the schedule for it. So, yes, John, if they wanted to schedule it to show it on BBC One on Christmas Day, I'm quite sure they could. Would they? Could it be? Well, and what would it be? And so this was just the thought that went through my head. I think the 2026 Christmas special has a good chance of being kind of a ellipse for the RTD thing. So it would be a kind of second Journey's End. Journey's End was kind of the culmination of the RTD 1 years, where you get two doctors, although they're both David Tennant. You get the two sort of most popular companions, Donna Noble and Rose Tyler, in sort of main parts, plus all the other people who have been regulars or semi-regulars across those years are basically coming back and showing up for extended cameos. I get the feeling that Christmas 2026 might be something similar. On
yeah.
the on the
Or it should be said, the end of time was the second Journey's End. Now
well,
we're on to the third.
well, no, the end of
Yeah.
time was the second Journey's End for RTD1. The Star Beast was the first Journey's End for RTD2, and this is the end of time for RTD2, is what I'm saying. So, but we'll see. Who
More the
knows? We'll
giggle I
see.
would go with that.
So
as
I've
Bridget
got
was
a,
saying.
I've got,
Yeah.
can I express my differing opinion with the caveat that I don't know anymore? But mm, I think these opinions depend on how you see RTD2 and what the shape of RTD2 and what you think Russell T Davies's motivations might be. And I think RTD's two, those three episodes, those three tenants were that they were the ellipsis at the end of they were the end of RTD1. And I think since then he's gone in a different direction and he's building up, or he was intending to build up towards something that's not drawing on Camille Coudry or God help us, Noel Clarke, and isn't returning to his own stuff. What he's done since the giggle feels like he's drawing on the bits of Chibnall, the bits of Moffat that he really liked and really regretted not doing, the bits of his own production that he never got round to when he was doing it. So he's sort of filling in his ambitions. So I I think it's going to be something different, and I've got an instinct that it's going to be more of he's going to try and do his Day of the Doctor, not repeating Day of the Doctor, but something on that scale that bridges something older than his period. Because one characteristic of RTD2 is he's going back to the original series because that's indulging, his instinct towards Sea Devils, Pyramids of Mars, Three Doctors, all of these things. He's sort of returning to a period of time before he starts. So I see next Christmas as being maybe a 90-minute opportunity for him to offer a climax of that RTD2 thing. And I think he hasn't done a proper multi-doctor story. So that's why I thought, I mean, if Matt Smith was available to do it, I think he would absolutely work with Matt Smith because Matt Smith's a big name.
He's worked with Matt Smith before.
Sarah
Yeah.
Jane Adventures.
Sarah Jane, yeah.
Well, not properly on Doctor Who.
Yeah, no,
He's
what I'm
written-
saying is he's worked with
written-
Matt
he's
Smith
written-
before, so it's not like he doesn't have previous on that.
No. But I think if I think he's always said that he doesn't like multi-doctor stories, but I think that's rubbish. I think that's one thing Russell T Davies does, is he says he doesn't like things that he's fully intending one day to do. And I just think with a multi-doctor story, he just never got round to doing a multi-doctor story. Stephen Moffat did it, Chibnall did it, but he hasn't really got his own. And I don't think it's going to be Tennant. I think the Tennant Tate stuff was rounded off in that those three specials. I think this is going to be something different. The only fly in the ointment is him bringing Billy Piper back, but I think that was a last minute kind of scramble because the Carol Ann Ford conclusion didn't work. I think that.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you
whole
have?
final episode was sort of gummed up with Disney leaving.
There's no reason you can't have a multi-doctor special with Billy Piper as one of the doctors.
Well, yeah, but I think he was. I think Matt Smith possibly Paul McGann are the only two options now, and Jodie Whittaker possibly.
Well, David Tennant is still an option.
I don't think so. I think David Tennant's done. I think those three episodes.
There was a video of David Tennant and what's his face? Oh God, the Welsh guy that he does Good Omens with, whose name's
Michael
gone.
Sheen.
And Michael Sheen is so this video went out 3 days ago, and Michael Sheen is just ribbing David Tennant for going back to Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's an old one. That's an old clip.
is it? No, I think it's.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was
Matt
another.
Smith
I
has
thought it was
been,
another one.
I think that the tendency is to think of Matt Smith at the moment as being this potential Hollywood star in films and that sort of thing. But he's just done, or it's just broadcasting now, this series that they've filmed on the south coast of England. This death of Bunny
Monroe, the Nick
Bunny
Cave
Monroe.
novel. I
The
think it
Nick
was.
Cave novel. That's right. Which I've been watching and which I'm really really hating. But I should carry on watching it.
Right. Anyway, I'm bringing this back around to
But
the
no,
reason.
the point I'm saying is that he does seem open to doing British TV shows as much as he ever did. So
for sure.
yeah.
But
Sorry, go on.
he's never been back to Doctor Who in any shape. So, and even Jodie Whittaker's done Big Finish now, but Matt Smith's never been anywhere near it. So, I don't know. It
Jodie
just
Whittaker was in the last episode, JR, as well. Come on.
absolutely, but Matt Smith wasn't. My
I
point
think he
being,
went for
it
a
doesn't look to me
Christmas
like.
special.
Sorry.
For a Christmas Day special.
Yeah, it could, yeah. No, I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. I'm just saying
Yeah.
there's been opportunities, and he just doesn't seem to want to find the time to do it.
I think there's a
There-
difference between Big Finish and a TV show, isn't there?
Yeah.
oh
I
yes,
think
but
there
he's
is a
not been
big
back on
difference
the.
there.
But he's not been back on the TV show
might
either.
just one
He's
more.
been working fairly regularly.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
That's
one
a
more
lot
point,
to do with
whenever
it.
he's asked, I've got a feeling he's always said if Karen Gillan goes back,
Yes,
he'd
it's
go.
Karen and
So
Arthur. Yeah.
it might be a either or. But then
But then,
his Hollywood career hasn't taken off,
but
and this is the
then
Christmas special.
it relies on them all being free at the same
Yeah.
time. And if this special is being done at relatively short notice, which it looks like it is being done, so that would make it less likely that you'd get returning actors because
Yeah.
chances are they're
Karen,
probably.
Karen Gillan's doing Jumanji, whatever the
Yeah.
third or fourth at the minute.
They won't get.
I think
don't
it's
think
done.
they'll get Karen Gillan back.
No, they just had a press conference to launch the filming of it.
Oh, to launch the filming of it. I thought the press
Yeah.
conference was for them to say we finished filming it.
No.
Anyway, I need to get on with this because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
The reason why I brought all that up is to say why would there be, or what form would a 10-minute Christmas 2025 thing take? And I was just struck by the notion that when Stephen Moffat was doing a big sort of celebratory knees up Doctor Who get together, what did he use as an aperitif? He took Paul McGann and stuck him in a little 5-minute thing that went out on the iPlayer ahead of time.
Which
And I
they
just thought,
originally offered to children in need
did
and
they?
got turned down.
My point being, though, is that as an aperitif to the main course, Paul McGann seems to be potentially your go-to guy. And it just struck me that it would be a symmetry of a kind if RTD is doing this one last blowout special to have as an aperitif for it in some ways, a 10-minute thing with Paul McGann in the TARDIS with Billy Piper. And that serves two purposes because so RTD's kind of maybe stupidly brought up this thing, is Billy Piper really the Doctor? It could I mean, probably, because he said that when he said that, he didn't really have any idea why he said it. He just wanted to introduce some intrigue. I just think if you did a 10-minute thing with Paul McGann, you could put a pin in, you could finish that off. You could address that and get it out of the way so that when you get to the Christmas special, you don't have to think about that anymore and you can just tell a story. So I just thought maybe you do a 10-minute thing with Paul McGann where Billy Piper's having a crisis because she doesn't know if she's the Doctor or not. Paul McGann turns up like Peter Davison did in Time Crash and says, "Yes, you're the Doctor," just exactly like Peter Capaldi and David Bradley as the two Doctors in Twice Upon a Time. So I just thought maybe if there is a thing, then that could be the thing. That could be something I could see RTD doing.
You may well do. Who knows?
Right, has anybody got anything more they do want to say about that? In that case,
There is no more knowledge left.
no.
That's
to
it.
dissect or read.
We've got 20 minutes out of a picture. What
Yeah,
more?
yeah.
RTD probably hasn't even written anything yet.
No, we know he must have because if they're going to have to start filming soon because we think the Bad Wolf contract for Doctor Who is up at the end of this financial year, so at the end of March or sometime around about then, and so we think that despite the fact that post-production won't be finished, we think production is probably
They may have extended it. We don't know. I mean,
well, they
could
may
have
well
done.
have. They may well have, but it makes sense that production itself would have to be done by that time anyway, in order for them to do the editing, grading, effects, and music and so on to have it ready in time for Christmas.
Wasn't the 1 year where they filmed the Christmas special in September?
Television's very different now, Steve.
Oh, I suppose so.
Is it Dr. Mysterio, I think we said?
Yeah,
Something like that.
look at the Star Beast and that. They filmed that 18 months to 2 years before it was on the telly. Even season 2, the reality war, they were editing that up until like a week or a fortnight before it was on, weren't they?
At
But if we're
least,
talking about a
probably
pared back
closer.
Doctor Who, then those timescales may be shorter.
But of course, with those things, a lot of post-production you can get done in advance because you know what special effects and so on you're going to be needing if you've got scripts and so on way ahead of time. If he's written this last minute, all that post-production is going to have to start from scratch. So,
They're not going to have to upgrade as they did with the Disney stuff, are they? Though they're not going to have to go for the 4K job, so it might be a little kind of
but they might,
shorter run in.
they may choose to do that just because that gives it longevity, but who knows?
Budget, it's budget, and with there's no Disney money on this one, so
Chances are,
they
chances are we'll be
shoestring
back
it.
before too long to talk about all this anyway. Until we do, I was JR.
I was John.
I was Matt.
And I was Steve. Oh, is that better?
And we will speak again soon. Or if you're watching this on video and you want to carry on, we're going to do the whole Fixing RTD thing to follow on from our series of Fixing Philip Hinchcliffe and Fixing Eric Saywood, which is due out on the podcast feed this week. So now we're doing Fixing RTD. Before we do, though, I just want to take 30 seconds to say something about the podcast feed that may or may not happen. But Libsyn have been messing around, and I'm not terribly happy with the way things are going at Libsyn. So I'm thinking of moving to a new podcast server. I'm hoping that I'm able to sort of transfer the back catalogue across from one to the other, but it is a substantial back catalogue of almost 1,000 episodes. So if I'm not, what I'll probably do is run 2 feeds at the same time, where I import as much of the back catalogue as I possibly can onto the new feed ahead of starting to put new episodes on the new feed. And whichever way I do it, there'll be a crossover period where the new feed and the old feed are running at the same time so that we can advertise the new feed and get people to subscribe. So hopefully it'll go smoothly and you won't even notice, but potentially in January there might be changes afoot. So just keep your eye out for it.
We could sell the podcast to Disney and use the back catalogue as a bargaining chip for it.
God damn it! Why don't we?
The classic Blue Box podcast episodes, we could have them.
That's no one wants to watch that stuff. That's black. That's equivalent of monochrome these
only
days.
The very, very early ones when it was just 3 of them in Mark's house.
Right, let us do Fixing RTD. You are listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next 60 minutes, we're going to be fixing Russell T Davies, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
So we did Fixing Philip Hinchcliffe, we did Fixing Eric Saywood, and in the Fixing Philip Hinchcliffe one, we basically talked about the things that shouldn't necessarily have been on children's telly in 1976. And in the Fixing Eric Saywood one, I moved the conversation on slightly because I thought it would be a bit dull if we just kept going round in circles with the same conversation. So I tried to hang a sort of separate thread onto that conversation around which we could hang the sort of discussion about the sort of things that might have been questionable about Eric Saywood's time. And I kind of want to do the same thing again with RTD. So this is mostly going to be about RTD1. I suppose if any of you think of things you want to bring up about RTD2, but I've got a sort of short list of talking points and they're all RTD1 talking points. So I think we'll mainly stick with that unless you do want to bring anything up. I suppose we could always do RTD2 as a separate conversation later down the line. I want to put out a thought before we start, and I want that thought maybe to be a fulcrum around where we draw lines, because our conversations have been about when does Doctor Who go over the line. And part of the conversation about when does Doctor Who go over the line has to be, well, who is Doctor Who for and who is accessing Doctor Who? So Doctor Who in the 1960s and 1970s was going out at approximately 5:30 till about 6 o'clock, most of the time, give or take. And even in the 80s, when it moved into the evenings, well, in the 80s, when it moved into the evenings, I think it changed shape slightly. and addressed a different audience slightly while hoping to still hold on to the old one. And I think, again, that's what happens with RTD. He puts it on at 7 p.m. on a Saturday, not 5:30. So this is not the sort of light entertainment slot, but this is the slightly more into the evening slot where the smallest children probably wouldn't be watching telly because, the smallest children would be going to bed at this time. And it also takes place in a universe where television is fractured and you've got dedicated channels for children. Did the dedicated channels for children exist at this time? They did, didn't they? Because things like
Pretty
Totally
sure they
Doctor
did,
Who
yeah.
and Blue Peter were on CBeebies or CBBC, weren't they? Totally
Yeah,
was on BBC One in that sort of tea time slot, but Sarah Jane Adventures was on CBBC
it
rather.
was, yeah.
So yeah, we already had dedicated channels by this point. So my contention is going to be, give or take, that he's putting stuff in there for the adults and the children. I think Russell T Davies's primary audience is teenagers. He kind of sets Doctor Who up as a sort of will they, won't they thing, a bit like moonlighting. But a lot of the concerns he's addressing are sort of teenagers' concerns. So you've got episodes like Father's Day, where you're addressing what do you do when a parent's dead, and through the eyes of a teenager. We kind of see the whole series through the eyes of the teenager, don't we? And across 10 stories in the first season, he puts 4 different love interests in the path of Rose Tyler to see which way that character goes. So I'm saying there's stuff in there for children, there's stuff in there for grown-ups, but I think primarily the audience that Russell T Davies has in mind is teenagers. Am I getting pushed back on that, or is that sort of, do we all think more or less?
He did state he wanted as broad a range as possible, but I think that kind of ties into that kind of previous Hinchcliffe Hobbs are looking for the intelligent teenagers. So it's teenagers, young adults, that kind of, not just teenagers as a concern. So maybe it's because he would be in his 40s at the time. So maybe his idea of what the concerns of young adults and teenagers are.
Yeah,
Is there
exactly.
also a case that the television programs that are pitched towards teenagers, in actual fact, the people you get mostly watching are the kids who are just about to be teenagers?
Yeah,
Because
maybe.
teenagers will be aware when things are geared towards them and will be resistant to it. Whereas if you're just about to be teenagers, watching it becomes an aspirational thing.
Well, that's it. You gear it towards the teenagers, but you don't tell them that.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, there is sort of also circumstantial evidence which suggests that I'm not entirely off the beaten track. I mean, the repeats are not on BBC Four or BBC Two. The repeats
Three.
are on BBC Three, which is the channel that is specifically aimed at teenagers. The ratings, believe it or not, I did a little research into the ratings just to find out kind of what the world thinks of who Doctor Who is for. And believe it or not, most of the countries around the world rate Doctor Who between 12 and 16. And even IMDb's parental guide, where they go through a process of getting, I don't know, opinions off a variety of different parents, I guess, and coming to a consensus, that is 10 plus too. So Doctor Who being for sort of 4 to 10 year olds, I don't.
Just to correct it, BBC Three isn't aimed at teenagers. It's aimed at a younger audience, which doesn't mean teenagers necessarily. It includes teenagers, but not specifically. Remember, Torchwood started off on BBC Three, and however juvenile it might be, it wasn't intended to be aimed at children, was it?
Well, it was after
And
the
there's been
watershed.
absolutely it was, but it was still on that channel, which is not a for teenagers channel. It's for younger viewers,
Well, okay, Steve, but
younger adults.
So
that's
hang on.
yeah.
So
CBBS
but the
is
point is
for
there are CBBS and there are channels aimed at young kids.
Yeah.
So the idea that BBC Three might be aimed at 12 to 18-year-olds, that kind of makes sense to me because
I
pre-12.
think it's 20 as well. I think it's kids,
Okay.
it's
I
people in the 20s.
I
I'd say, I
suspect
mean to
it's
say kids
I
in
mean,
the 20s from my
it's
standpoint,
like
but yeah.
centuries. You get the long 19th century, the long 20th century,
yeah.
the long 1970s. You probably get a long teenagers period of 10 to 20.
Yeah, I would have probably pegged it as 13 to 24, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly
about
that.
right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and so when I say teenagers, I'm generalizing, but I think Russell T Davies is looking at the 13 to 24 audience primarily, wants all the other audiences too, but I think primarily is trying to target that audience. And actually in RTD2, they've specifically spoken about that audience basically, haven't they? So I just wanted to throw that out there and say that's sort of the fulcrum around the rest of this conversation because I mean, we've talked about is Doctor Who scary, too scary? When does it cross the line of scariness? I don't think modern Doctor Who, the conversation about scariness is really quite relevant anymore. Anymore, I think when it's really scary, like in Blink, that's a good thing, and I don't think it crosses a line. I mean, I wrote down the sort of scary episodes being like the Empty Child as well, but I don't think anybody thought that was an unhealthy scariness.
I think that
No.
what say what you want about RTD, but he gets the tone in terms of violence and horror.
About right,
He
yeah,
gets it
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, part of it I think is he's more regulated, so the BBC is more professional, and it's not like Philip Hinchcliffe gets sent away and pretty much what he wants ends up on screen. I think it's much more carefully regulated now, and they know it is. But again, RTD knows this, so he's very careful about what he does.
I
And
Oh
think
no,
the
but
only one
at,
that's
at the time they were claiming that Tooth and Claw was the scariest Doctor Who episode ever broadcast. And I don't think anybody would look at that and say this
Oh,
is a
when
really.
they
I,
claiming
I
that every episode is the
I would say
scariest
the only
broadcast.
one
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, yeah.
the only one I think I'd say steps up to a line. I don't think what cross it is the Impossible Planet. That first
Okay.
episode. That
Yeah.
is a horror. That is just a pure horror film all the way. It's got possession. You've got someone murdered by being put in a vacuum. You've got the body floating by, all that kind of stuff.
I think the
So that's the one.
waters. I think the waters
Bloodless.
of Mars comes close on that count too.
It
Yeah,
does
waters.
actually. It
I
does.
think those
Does
those two did go out later, didn't they? As well,
No,
they
the
had a
waters of
slightly later
Mars.
time
The
strip.
waters of Mars was the earliest Doctor Who's been broadcast since the
Really,
1970s. Yeah, it was
six.
5:05 p.m. I think.
Oh, I always thought it was later.
there's another one I would point at, which is not an entire episode, but a particular aspect of a particular episode, which is Lucy Saxton. Lucy Saxon, which
Well,
I thought
Yeah.
that very much overstepped them.
well, that's not in the scariness conversation, is it, Steve?
I suppose not. Well, I don't know. It depends who you are and what your
You're
circumstances are.
anticipating what JR is about to move on to, which
All
would
right.
be
I've
Okay.
got two categories, and they're sort of broad categories of things that I brought up that I kind of, and I didn't bring everything up. I didn't bring that up, but I think that's a perfectly valid entry into one of these. They're just talking points, but I put them into two categories. One of the categories is sex, and the other category is morality. And I think the reason I did this is because there's a thing where a television program can insinuate things into the audience in a way that happens by virtue of if you watch the same thing, the same program a lot over a period of time, if it's doing a particular thing over that period of time, then that becomes kind of normalized. And so there are things like, for example, I mean, the famous joke in the Love and Monsters where he says we even have a bit of a sex life, right? A
Oh,
bit of a
yes.
love life, not a sex
Yes.
life, a bit of a love life. For me, I think anybody who doesn't recognize that that could be talking about fellatio is not going to think anything of it. They're just going to think, oh, they probably kiss. She's still got a mouth. They probably kiss. And when I first saw it, I wasn't looking for the sex side of it. And I just looked at that line and thought, oh, they still kiss. She's still got a mouth. They still kiss. And then online, everybody's saying, oh, it's a joke about a blowjob. And I'm like, yeah, maybe it is. But if it is, then you're only going to get it if you're old enough to already be making jokes about blowjobs.
and that's the joke working as well because
Yeah.
RTD. There's a difference between crossing the line or just being provocative in a way that will get you on the internet, in a way that will get people watching the series thinking, oh, it's edgy.
It's meant to be carry on level kind of
Yeah.
joke anyway. You can put it to it's fine.
Carry on in the 2000s. So
Yes.
so it's carry on, but it's slightly updated because
You're
it's
right.
taking
It
place.
was near the mark, but
Yeah.
it would have gone above the heads of a lot of the younger people watching it.
And that, I think, is kind of my point. The whole
Yeah.
teenager thing. If you're sort of 13 and up, you're going to get that. Or
Yeah.
things like that. You're going to understand that that's more adult level of humor. If you're younger, you're probably not. I think there are some slightly more questionable things in there. And the reason I brought up this thing about normalizing stuff is I wonder if across the period, there's not a case to say that RTD kind of redraws maybe where the line is. I think maybe when you get to the last couple of seasons, Doctor Who is now aging up as it's going along a bit. I wonder if all that stuff with Martha and the unrequited love stuff in the third season, I wonder if that would play as well with 13-year-olds as it would with 15-year-olds who were 13 when you had the Rose Tyler stuff. Because the Rose Tyler stuff is more simple. She fancies him, he fancies her. Will they get together? Let's find out. Whereas the unrequited love stuff is I think, a much more mature level of emotional comprehension. And I wonder
It's just
if,
clumsy,
Possibly, but
though.
it is a teenage thing as well, where you're falling.
well, it is.
It
That's
was
what I mean.
clumsy, and it sabotaged that character. I mean, it
We're not here
absolutely
to talk
sabotaged
about
the
whether
character.
it was the right thing to do in that
No,
sense,
no, no,
Steve.
no, 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 no. But the fact that it was done so clumsily, I think would have affected how it would have resonated with the audience.
Well, you and I
Um,
think it's clumsy, but if you were
uh,
15 watching that and you fancy somebody who's got no time for you and they're obsessed with their ex-girlfriend, I think you recognize that and it plays.
I think
well, maybe.
you can look, and this is talking about RTD2. You can look at some of the things RTD does in his rebooted series now that there's been how many years? Like 15, 20 years since some of these episodes come out. And you can see him thinking, okay, I did this, as Steve says, quite clumsily back in the day. I depicted suicide in this episode, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
I with Donna and the way Donna left, and the Doctor forcing himself on Donna to wipe her mind, that was clumsy. And there are sort of relationships here, like Mickey and Rose's relationship. There's sort of imbalances, power imbalances in relationships, controlling relationships, and a lot of what he does in his second period is actually
He's doing that
is
picks himself.
fixing things, is
Yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of returning to some of the things he in retrospect gets wrong. And part of it is, I think, when he's writing it originally, he's obsessed with putting emotional reality in and real relationships. And at the time, it's sort of more acceptable at the time. But also, I think he was clumsy in the way that he did it. I think he did it in a kind of as an adult writer, and I think that is one of the areas he occasionally got wrong in depicting relationships, and I think then he has 10 years of people saying to him, "Oh, you were great. You were such a great writer." That was a bit of a weird moment. Or he's looking at Chibnall's writing, or maybe even Moffat's writing, although Moffat's not immune to this, and thinking, well, actually, they address this, and it's quite right that they address this, so I want to address it.
Okay, I really want to move on to the morality bit because I think that's the bit where the more interesting conversation is. But I did write a few things down that I want to ask a question about. A couple of things here where I wonder if they did go slightly too far, and they're both slightly later in the series, which is why I brought out about I wonder if he's aging it up slightly. One is the S&M cats in the car in Gridlock, and I'll tell you why I bring this up. If you make a joke and it's a verbal joke, then if you don't understand what the dual meaning of the verbal joke is, then the dual meaning is going to go over your head. But if you put it on screen a physical representation of something, there's no disguising that. And although there's no obvious leaning into the sexuality of it, when he puts the S&M cats in the car in Gridlock, I don't think. I wonder if that's right on the edge of what's tasteful and acceptable at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night. I don't know.
It's interesting because there's a sort of a history, there's a kind of a heritage of S&M being used in sort of teenage, because the Avengers did the same thing
I
repeatedly,
suppose, yeah,
is
yeah.
using S&M imagery. Um,
But the Avengers wasn't aimed at teenagers; it was aimed at
The
adults. It was
Avengers was
popular
a
with
late
teenagers.
Saturday evening show,
It
wasn't it?
was later
Yeah.
on, yeah.
but it's still back in the day. There's
Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah.
kind of, S&M abstracted.
Well, in the 90s, they were repeating it at 7 o'clock on BBC Two, right? Weren't
Yeah.
they? I think.
And
Yeah.
didn't the original Batman TV series, that
I think so.
in
Yeah.
retrospect, whether it was intentional or not, had sort of,
Catwoman and
yeah.
leather and a whip. And, yeah.
I don't know whether you could quite go as far as to call that S&M though. I don't know.
It's leaning in that direction, and it is like
Yeah.
40 years earlier.
And it's as much as the cats in Gridlock.
Again, though, the Batman TV series, believe it or not, I think was pretty much aimed at adults.
Yeah.
Originally, that
It was. In the US, it was.
Well, it works
Yeah,
on
yeah.
both levels, doesn't it? I mean, I saw it as a 7-year-old and absolutely laughed
Well,
it
yes,
off
we all,
as an adventure
we all
series.
saw
Yeah.
it as sort of
Yeah.
7 to 10-year-olds. So again, that kind of imagery is sort of, that's just cool imagery.
Yeah.
The other thing I was wanted to bring up before we get into the sort of what are the morals of this was just the bit in the end of time where there's a very heavy insinuation that the Doctor's been shagging the Virgin Queen and she's not a virgin no more. I mean, I looked at that line and they don't quite go there, do they? So RTD's very careful not to overstep the mark. But I wonder if just broaching that subject in itself, or again, is it the case that if you understand the joke, you've got to be old enough to understand the joke? And if you don't, and they don't even say what the nickname is, so maybe it doesn't overstep the mark. I don't know.
I mean, at this stage, you wonder how much is getting on screen that Ben Cook is just bantering
Yeah.
with RTD over email and just daring him to slip in jokes and things like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, he gets away with it. He does. I think he gets away with it. I think
Yes,
I think one thing he does have in terms of these kind of jokes and Easter eggs and one-liners, I think he's got a good kind of a good sense of what he can get past and what
Yeah.
he shouldn't. Just
Right. The morality of the first 5 years of the sort of revival of Doctor Who, then the sort of the things that, and this is again, this goes back to my sort of thing about normalization. These are the things where I think, are we normalizing something here that shouldn't be normalized? And yeah, we've already mentioned a couple of them, but I'm going to bring up certain things. I'm going to start with a really frivolous one that we can get right past. So Steve froze for a minute, so you might have missed
I'm
it.
back.
But I'm going to talk about things that I wonder whether we we overstep the mark in terms of what we put in front of an audience. And by putting them in front of an audience, are we saying to the audience these things are acceptable? And I'm saying, is there a question around that? And the first one is just, I've brought this up for fun, but I thought I'd kick this part of the conversation off with this. In The Unquiet Dead, you revive a dead person, and it is a moment of comic humor, you know, and and so the only reason I bring this up is because everybody bangs on about Death in Heaven, and or is it Dark Water, the first one, rather than Death in Heaven, isn't it? And Stephen Moffat, the whole thing about cremation and stuff like that. And I just think, well, you can sort of trace that back to here because somebody's died, their family are there, the dead person climbs up, runs off like a zombie, and the family are distraught, and the funeral director is laughing at them.
But that kind of makes the point about Death in Heaven, doesn't it? It doesn't
Well,
do
I
the
think so,
opposite.
yes.
It kind of, if Death in Heaven added humor to it, I think it would actually lessen the impact of Death in Heaven and make it more acceptable. It's the fact that Death in Heaven is so serious and so kind
Well, it
of
is funny, but very
brutal.
blackly so.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's the tone of the humor. I
Yeah.
think, is
Well,
I,
and this
I
is it.
I
But
thought
I,
that was just fine, but I can understand why some people might be upset by it.
well, no, I don't think you would. Well, this is it. I don't think you would be upset by it. But I think my point is, if you're not upset by this, then you shouldn't really be upset with Dark Water either, because essentially it is pretty much the same thing. It's
It's
about.
that I was talking about. It was that what I was talking about.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah,
But we will have that conversation when we do
yeah, yeah.
Stephen Moffat.
Of course, yeah.
So here's one, and this is a Stephen Moffat thing too, but it happens during the RTD years first, and we'll probably talk about this more when we do Stephen Moffat in a couple of weeks' time, or whenever, because this will come up again. But The Girl in the Fireplace, which I thought was a great story, and I think there's a rationale behind what happens, but a lot of people took that to be a story about grooming. I mean,
Oh,
do we
oh.
think it's a story about grooming? Does the Doctor groom Renette so that
and of
she'll
course
fall in
it
love
is
with him?
also a Stephen Moffat story. It basically it's like the 11th Hour. It just says to you, Stephen Moffat has read The Time Traveler's Wife,
Yeah.
and it may be that he's lifting from that slightly uncritically, maybe because the tropes in there are
Well, and
quite on the knuckle, so it's near the
Mm,
knuckle, I should say.
mm.
And The Time Traveler's Wife, of course, is written by Audrey Schiffernager. So,
Niffenegger, yeah.
yeah, whatever. And I knew I was going to get it wrong.
Yeah, no, that one's a weather forecaster.
So that becomes from a female perspective. So maybe
Yeah.
when a male writer is lifting something from a female writer, uncritically, as John says, it takes on a different dimension. But I've always had it that Stephen Moffat looks at the characters that he has on the screen and he asks, what would the audience think if they were that character? And I think when he shows somebody as a child on screen in Doctor Who, not every time, because obviously there are a lot of children you don't see as grown ups, but I think some of the time he's looking at the children and thinking the children in the audience watching will want to think that they could be the Doctor's favourite. Not a romantic favourite, but somebody that the Doctor would take on as a companion or be friends with. And I think some of the time, what Stephen Moffat's doing is saying, here's the child who wants to be the Doctor's best friend, and here's that child as an adult. And guess what? They do get to be the Doctor's best friend. And so there's a certain wish fulfillment thing for the watching children in the audience.
So connected to that is the tone of the piece. So
Mm.
it's fairy tale. I mean,
Yeah.
and that is, children and growing up, and the tone of the piece goes some way to mitigate any darkness or any kind of accusations of darkness. So I would suspect that accusations of grooming is more in the eyes of the beholder in there than just not looking at. They're just not embracing the kind of the fantasy aspects of the story,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
they're kind of
it
looking for things. It doesn't help that it's sort of broadcast in the
it
middle of the
as-
Savile
Yeah.
it assumes
stuff.
bad intent on the
Yeah,
Doctor's part, and I don't think you can put that there either on this one or the 11th Hour.
yeah.
I mean, to me, it's slightly more problematic if you've got the story with Fear Her, which is essentially a story about an abused child. Now, there's a question: is that a fit subject for a Doctor Who story?
Oh, and I think so, absolutely.
Yeah,
But you've got to handle it sensitively.
Yeah,
yeah,
and I think they just about get away with it until you get that maybe the cupboard bit where he's that
Yeah.
growling, horrific
Mm.
presence in the cupboard. And I don't think that would disturb us as adults, if particularly if we haven't got any of that in our history. But that to kids, is that going to scare them? Is that going to
I
Well,
think
terrify
there
them?
would be
Well,
kids who that would upset. I think there are kids
Yeah,
watching who would
but that's
upset.
the important thing about it being a single episode is that you get resolution and
Yeah.
relief from that
yeah.
within a few minutes. And so for any children watching, if they recognize that situation and they find that adult presence frightening,
Yeah.
they also get to see that adult presence being got rid of and what happens afterwards and the relief that comes afterwards. And I think that's important. I think that's got to be the job of Doctor Who sometimes, is to say these are the things that are scary for children, and sometimes they are real things. You know, there's this famous quote, isn't it, that the monsters aren't really real. And then you get that. But Stephen Moffat and RTD move it on from there and say, what if the monsters under the bed are real? And Fear Her is a great example of that.
I
And
think
I think it does a really good job of it.
I think you see that we know that Russell T Davies, a major influence is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
And that's not just an influence in terms of arc storylines, it's an influence in terms of tone, and what Joss Whedon kind of led the way to say what tone is appropriate for 13 to 24 year olds.
Yeah.
And in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Buffy's mother dies, and the whole episode is very
Yeah.
upsetting, surrounding the death of Buffy's
The,
mother
bo-
on the
the
sofa.
body. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's a brilliant episode and a
it
well-regarded
is.
episode. And you get characters being tortured and characters failing and all of these things. And whatever you think of Joss Whedon these days, because he's an arsehole, he got the tone exactly right for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. RTD followed in his wake and did the same thing. And most of the time, he got it absolutely right. He
I
went
think the
up to the
interesting
line.
thing, and yeah, I think interesting was you talk. I've talked to Rob Schumann about his episode, Dalek, and I think after watching, he said, "Oh, that's not in the tone of the series." Do you understand that kind of that intense dramatic thing? With the scenes with the Doctor and the Dalek, that kind of thing maybe did push things a little bit too far on the intensity, on maybe how terrifying it would be for kids to see this character that they've got to know over the past 5 weeks, and all of a sudden he becomes almost a maniac, close enough animalistic when he sees the
And he's
Dalek.
tortured, isn't he? He's strung up and
Yeah,
tortured.
yeah.
But
But
did
again, I think the
anybody
45-minute episode format is important when it comes to these things, because you get to see in the same episode how these things resolve and the different aspects.
Mm.
Because the point of the Dalek is the Dalek kind of, we all know that the Dalek is this murderous menace, and we get to see it in the episode. So it goes from the Dalek torturing the Doctor to the Doctor torturing the Dalek and all points in between. And eventually it resolves on a point of kind of bringing everybody together.
And you can kind of see the success in the real world in terms of, obviously, kids were allowed to continue watching Doctor Who beyond the first 3 or 4 or 5 episodes.
Mhm.
They weren't banned from watching it. The parents were happy to sit with. Doctor Who was successful. The ratings indicate that actually the tone was absolutely fine. And also, anecdotally, going out at Halloween those first few years and seeing kids dressed in gas masks, or kids dressed ultimately in Weeping Angel costumes or whatever, that sort of proves or indicates that, in general, it was all right. There were bits in retrospect that, we think are too intense, or maybe Rob Sherman's comments make me think that maybe he thinks that it was out of kilter with the tone of the rest of the series, but not necessarily inappropriately
I think it was a turning
intense.
point.
I think it's just, it stood out a bit.
Well, and I think it was a turning point because I think you get that more of that tone, not precisely, but I think that tone that he has in that episode heralds where the series is going to be for the next 4 years. And it kind of leaves those first 5 episodes behind, doesn't it? The first
Mm.
5 episodes are the sort of more frivolous feeling ones. And then after that, it kind of never quite goes back to that again.
I mean,
Even
once you're through the awful spectacle that is Rose, the series starts to improve no end.
Go on,
um,
I want to bring up Lucy Saxon again though, because I
go
think
on then,
that is
yeah.
a real significant one, and it's one that I think that for me is the only time during the first RTD era where the line is very clearly crossed.
Oh no,
And
I
I
think
thought
there's another, but we'll get to it.
well, okay, but it did make me feel very uncomfortable, and it wasn't that Master was being unpleasant to Lucy, or that or whatever. It was the violence, it implied violence. If we'd seen him clip her or whatever, then in some ways that would almost have been better than the fact that she shows up with a black eye and it's not actually explicit. It's just there in our faces. We can see it and we know something absolutely horrible has happened to this woman. And of course, it's important because it goes on to be her motivation for doing what she does at the end of that episode when she shoots him. But I just felt it wasn't necessary to have that physical sign of violence there.
There's an argument to say that if you had showed him hitting her, then any kid in the audience watching could have looked at that and said, that reminds me of something that happens at home, but he's not my dad and she's not my mum. And so there's a level at which I'm removed from it.
Yeah.
But if you just show the bruise, then
Yeah.
that causes the kid to imagine what happened in their own head. And if
Yes.
they're imagining that in their own head, then they impose their parents into it and that personalizes it. And so
I see.
maybe there's another way of doing that where you can see that Lucy Saxon's suffering, but it's not through that
It
specific
could have
kind of
just been.
domestic.
It didn't need to be physical. It could have just been the master constantly putting her down or something
I
like
think there's a
that. Or
problem. I think my problem with it is that there's something about the master as an alien. There's something fantastical about the master, and obviously he commits mass murder. He gasses the entire British cabinet,
Yeah.
and that's kind of fine because that's
But it's somewhere in the level of Tom and Jerry, really,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
but also that
It's
fits
standard RTD politics.
that
Yeah.
fits in,
Yeah.
but that also fits in with the master's character of the master being basically like the Joker. But there's something about him being a domestic abuser that kind of goes in a different direction, an unexpected direction, because that's a very human thing. And there's something about that tonal imbalance that makes it stand out.
Yeah.
And there's something about it standing out that makes it feel a bit uncomfortable, I think. I don't
The bit where he's
line necessarily, but
the bit where he's talking to the journalist and he sort of opens the door and laughs and closes the door and opens the door and
Of the whirring noise, should
Yeah.
we say.
that bit, that's a sort of fantasy version of the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And that works because it's a fantasy version. So yeah. Well, and so on that subject, so the other three things that I've got written on this list, and there are plenty more examples, but these are the three things I've got written on this list. These are all real world concerns for people as well, in many ways. One of them's sort of a more general thing that's out of people's sort of personal sphere, I suppose. So I'll put that one to one side for a minute. But one of them is, and so this was talked about a lot at the time, and some people just said, oh, it's dreadful. And some people, I mean, I was inclined to be in the second group when it went out, and I just thought, oh, that's a nice, quick way to just get past it and get on with the story. But
I know
actually,
where you're
no.
going.
Well, in some ways, I think the story
Yeah.
should have been about this. The Shakespeare Code.
Oh no, you weren't going where I thought you
Oh,
were.
no. I'm coming back to the other one. No, in
Right.
the Shakespeare Code, at the start of the story, where Martha walks in and says, I'm worried about the colour of my skin,
Yeah.
and the doctor just brushes it off and says,
Yeah.
just walk about like you own the place. Anybody watching that programme who is worried about what kind of abuse they might get because of the colour of their skin,
Yeah.
one of my real world friends is a Muslim, and he says that in the last few years, in particular, the sort of racist abuse, and especially the sort of underlying racist abuse, which isn't necessarily obvious, has just increased beyond any. But even back then, right? We should be better now. But even back then, there was a lot of this kind of thing.
I think that falls in the category of he then addressed it in RTD2.
Well,
That's
yeah,
one of the things that
absolutely.
he returned to, but also, as you say, the world has moved on in an unfortunate direction.
But
where it
also,
sort of
It
highlights
should also be
now.
said that that story is credited to a writer with a very conservative point of view.
well, yes, absolutely. But RTD has to give the green light and tick the box.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're not
Yeah.
wrong, Matt, that he addresses it later. But I still don't think that makes it right that it happens in the first place.
It could be seen as a character point on the Doctor's part, though, because he's always been the white man, being able to go into these societies and boom, I'm fine, I'm great.
Yeah, but the story
He's
doesn't
not
make it
thinking.
that, does it? If
No,
it was that,
this is it. It's I
But we
think
know that's what he is, don't we? Because we saw him in Midnight. He just automatically assumes that he's the boss
yeah,
of the place and everyone will listen to him, and it doesn't work out
because
Well,
that way.
look,
I
It's
think
part of
RTD
that,
is
I
is
think.
very progressively minded, clearly over the
Yeah,
years,
yeah, yeah,
but it can be careless around race. I mean, the other thing about
yes.
that that's really well intentioned is you have a lot of particularly supporting artists of different ethnicities. And if you look at the number of, of Indian descent, of Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan descent, who get killed off, that does kind of send an unfortunate message unconsciously. So it's just, I think, careless. Again, it's white people's carelessness around race, I think, because
Well,
this is just
absolutely.
we're just the dominant skin color in our society, and it's just
But
we don't think.
But look at how Thin Ice treats exactly the same question and does it with so much more thought and so much
Yeah.
more integrity, and makes it funny. So does it lightly enough that it's not funny and becomes a really serious point, but gets the serious point through the door on the back of it happening in kind of a funny way. Whereas the Shakespeare, I do think it's a problem, to
yeah.
be
I,
honest, that you just brush it off and sort of like 20%, 30% of the watching audience are told, yeah, I'm sorry, your feelings don't count.
I think it's a clumsy moment, but it's not one that he.
It's not deliberate.
It's not an
No,
endemic
No.
thing because, and again, human nature. Not that many episodes later, they kind of do it in a different way in
Yeah.
human nature, in a way that sort of supports John's idea that actually this is also a reflection on the David Tennant Doctor, even though David Tennant's Doctor isn't really David Tennant's Doctor in human nature. But that kind of dismissiveness and kind of that the idea of sort of, I mean, it's a kind of a the fallacy of color blindness,
yeah,
basically.
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think Moffat's approach in Thin Ice probably recognizes RTD's approach and sort of goes some way to fixing it, and then RTD's approach later recognizes the problems throughout and goes some way to fixing those
Yes,
as well.
yes.
But fixing things after the fact doesn't mean it's right to do it in the first place, I guess is kind of my point. And on that subject, and what you were just saying is the other one that I've written down that's kind of similar, and this gets fixed like 2 years later. So they realize, RTD realizes he's made a boo-boo here and actually comes back and fixes this 2 years later with another story that addresses this problem head on. But it's the idea of slavery in the Impossible Planet. The Ood are a slave race. And I, even at the time, so some of these things, I wasn't on the internet at the time, so I didn't know what other fans were saying. Some of these things kind of went over my head a bit until I was on the internet, and I did see people talking about it. But this one, straight away, I thought, you've put the Ood in there. They're a slave race. Slavery is clearly wrong, and yet all the characters are happy with it, and the Doctor doesn't ask why, doesn't question it, just says, yeah, slavery here is acceptable.
Is it not questioned in it? Does Rose not sort of ask
What
questions?
happened to the Ood?
And
Yeah.
all the characters die. So it's a kind of a slasher movie in which the sinners do get their comeuppance in the end.
But they don't get their comeuppance because of the sin.
Well, no, but that's a slasher thing, isn't it? If a character has sex, they don't die because they had sex.
Oh
There's a
no,
sort of a
well, sort
there's
of
a
they
kind of
do.
a New Testament morality to slasher movies.
But I don't think there is any morality in the Impossible Planet. I think, and I'm not wrong because RTD says we made a boo boo there, and I had to come back and address it. So
Mm.
he thought the same thing. I just think it's a weird thing to put in that story, a slave race, and
It's a
sort of
traditional science fiction trope, isn't it? It's
It
as
it
old
feels
as the
more like
hills.
feels more to me like it was an editing issue that there was more in Rose's reaction or the Doctor's reaction to the situation that maybe didn't quite make the screen. Either it got cut out or the script got edited down or something. And that was the boo-boo, was it wasn't clear enough from the episode
I don't know because I
that
think
they were
RTD's
cross with it.
reaction is that nobody making the story saw it as a problem.
Hmm.
I mean, that's why he comes back and addresses it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that. I just wanted to bring that up because I do think that's a moment. Because, see, the problem for me is that says to the audience watching at home, "Oh, slavery, it's okay."
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's the problem. If you're saying to the audience at home, slavery, that's okay, even if that's not the lesson you're meaning to impart, and even if you address it a couple of years later, there are going to be people in the audience
Mm.
who innately,
Well, it's worse. It's worse than that, isn't it? Because actually, there is a comeuppance to the characters, but the comeuppance is
turn into
the,
monsters.
the slaves turn into monsters.
Yeah.
So it's got that kind of myth of the horror of the slave uprising, but you're seeing it from the slave owner's perspective rather than the slave's perspective.
Yes. Because what you're saying is you've slavery's okay, and not only is it okay, but you pretty much have to do it, otherwise, they're going to turn into monsters.
Yeah.
So I do find that a bit problematic. Okay, I'm going to get to the one that I really think of as the most problematic thing in the entirety of RTD1, and you all know what I'm saying now, right? You'll know what I'm going to come to. Unless anybody else has got anything else they want to bring up first, I guess I'll ask afterwards. But this,
Well,
for
so long
me,
as you're going to talk about the suicide, that's all right.
yes, I think the suicide
Yeah.
is the most problematic thing in the entire history of Doctor Who, frankly. I thought so at the time. I think so now. I don't think that's changed. The fact that it went out at 6 p.m. on a Sunday or
Mm,
whatever it was, I
mm,
think is just utterly insane. And there's a reason why I think it's a problem, because self-sacrifice is something that is, pretty much standard in a lot of adventure fiction and certainly in Doctor Who. This is not a self-sacrifice. But worse than that, I think RTD thinks it is a self-sacrifice, but he doesn't present it as such. And the difference between a self-sacrifice and what happens here is, in a self-sacrifice, what you are doing is saving everybody else from the same fate. So when, what's it called, Ralston, or whatever his name is, at the end of Death to the Daleks, blows himself up in the Dalek spaceship, he dies, but in dying, he saves everybody else from dying too. They would all have died, and he saved them.
mm,
What happens at the end of Waters of Mars is she's not saving everybody else from dying. She's killing herself. And the moral lesson that that story is presenting is the world around her is a better place because she's dead. And I just think that is absolutely, utterly morally reprehensible. And I don't think it should ever have gone out in Doctor Who. And I think everybody at the time was a bit high on their own success. And the BBC was high on Doctor Who's success. The sort of executive producers were high on Doctor Who's success. And everybody just went, yeah, RTD, you're brilliant, and waved it through. And I don't think anybody questioned it. Anybody thought even to try and stop it. And I think it's a hideous bit of television because even the sort of story logic of it doesn't work. She kills herself because she was supposed to die on Mars. She kills herself in a living room in fucking Peckham or somewhere. Not the same thing. So the story logic doesn't even work either. I just think it's horrible.
no.
I don't know. Steve, I'd come to you first because obviously,
No, I said before that Lucy Saxon was the only thing that left me a bit disturbed. Of course, this is yeah. This is absolutely as disturbing and absolutely as wrong as that. It didn't need to happen. There must it would have needed a paragraph for Adelaide to decide to stay on board the base as it explodes, or self-sacrifice herself another way, or something like that. It didn't
Basically,
need this.
it's a bit of Saywood sneaks into the series.
yeah,
It's kind of the problem
Yeah,
is it goes against the kind of morality of Doctor Who, which is
yeah,
generally a positive one. I mean, for all the sort of the intricate plot logic or lack of logic around it and
the way I
that's
phrased
one
it
thing.
before.
But the
Yeah,
way it's presented is is it's written by somebody who's been writing Torchwood or been watching Torchwood, and
yes,
Torchwood
yes,
has that same view that to be adult and to be scary, it has to be grim, it has to be
yeah,
dark.
But that's an RTD, I think, because he's quite nihilistic as a writer.
Well,
Sometimes, but not always.
no, he
It's
generally.
I think his
it's
underlying
there.
worldview is negative.
Yeah,
Totally.
It's there to lead into the Time Lord Victorious stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which then doesn't go very far anyway. I mean,
So
it's
I think
dealt
RTD
with pretty soon.
RTD is an angry writer, and I think he can be nihilistic. But the trick he uses mostly with Doctor Who is it's like that side of him is pulling his writing in one direction, and he knows how to pull back with the fantasy and the humor in the other direction. And normally that's where the tension works. Whereas Stephen Moffat's a comedic writer, so that's pulling him, and he pulls back with the darkness just about right. So it's a kind of an opposite approach. But in this occasion, like he does with Torchwood, the nihilism just takes over, and that's not sort of good entertainment.
It
This
goes
one was
back
written
to,
by Phil Ford, wasn't it? Phil Ford and RTD. Am
Yeah,
I
Phil
right?
Ford. It's
Yeah.
a joint credit. It's a joint credit. Yeah.
but I think
Yeah, and
basically,
he was the showrunner on Sarah Jane
oh yeah,
for
yeah.
Yeah.
so we probably decided, oh, enough of the children's stuff.
Oh no. I'm convinced Phil Ford writes the first half an hour and Russell T Davies writes the
Maybe,
last half
maybe.
an hour.
Phil Ford's a good writer and a good
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
make,
And
which
a
dramatologist.
makes
lovely man. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
which
good
makes
man.
sense because, as Steve says, it's RTD leading into he's
Yeah.
paving the way for
For the end of
a
time.
kind of a big, grand, dark conclusion
Yeah.
that never really happens.
Well,
No.
no, because he solves the Time Lord Victorious in this episode with
Yeah.
that suicide, and then has the Doctor start in the next episode going, "Oh my God, somebody killed themselves because of me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's not really any better than it was at the start of Time Flight after Earthshock.
Yeah.
Really, I mean
Well,
that's the
the next
comparison.
episode opens with him trying to dodge it, doesn't it? 'Cause
Yeah,
he's quite obvious. But
yeah.
that's a character point, I think, as well.
Well, it
But
is a
also
character
that's
point, but
that's the Mary Whitehouse problem.
Time
Yeah.
slip sort of starts
So
with poor Adric, never mind then.
yes,
yeah,
but this is the Mary Whitehouse problem that if and it would have to be framed in a different way. But if the suicide had happened in the middle of the story and the rest of the story was the Doctor recognizing how awful it is, seeking to reverse it, and maybe even reversing it, that would have been fine. But the Mary Whitehouse thing is it happens at the end of the story, and that's the last thing you
Yes.
see
Yes.
Yeah.
before, well, in this case, what, 2 months, a month?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's about 7 weeks, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's like a long period before it's
six
not.
weeks. Yeah, mid-November
Yeah,
till
a
December.
long period before it's not really resolved. So it is
And
like that
the
deadly
next thing
assassin
we
movie.
see is the Doctor turning up to the Oods encampment with a feather boa type thing around it, with a garland around his neck, and
That's it.
Yeah.
generally rejoicing. And
Yeah, so it's
yeah,
kind of there's a problem with the moment, but there's also a problem with the position of the moment. What happens
Mm.
after that? How
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
built up to. It's just in the wrong place.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
I
I'm
don't think it's
actually,
just that. It isn't just that, but yeah.
Mm.
No, but
but it goes back to as well something else that I brought up on another podcast is that there's kind of a philosophy in Doctor Who that mostly the program is the kind of inherent philosophy is who can we save? Doctor Who's a program about who can we save, and every now and again, and this I think it was during the Saywood conversation, wasn't it, where Saywood's mentality at certain points becomes who can I kill
yeah,
as a story
Yeah.
writer rather than who can I save, who can I kill? And I think the end of Waters and Mars is Russell T Davies firmly in the who can I kill territory rather than the who can I save territory. It
and
becomes it loses the tone of Doctor Who in that moment.
like as with the Saywood conversation, part of it is about the role of the Doctor in the deaths of characters. So the flaw of the fifth Doctor under Saywood and the sixth Doctor under Saywood is he's passive. He's barely in Revelation of the Daleks. He takes an episode to turn up to Revelation of the Daleks
He takes
whilst
an
people
episode
are
to
dying.
take a plot. Yeah.
Yeah,
In every story,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
and that's a problem because the Doctor's supposed to be the hero of the series. the children are supposed to see the Doctor as being the magic wizard that could potentially save lives. And this is basically a Saywood. Waters of the Mars is not Hinchcliffing the shit up of the series, it's Saywooding
Yeah.
the series. And I think, as we said with Saywood, there's a fundamental psychological flaw with Saywood that he is incapable of writing for Doctor Who.
And every now and again, and this is one example, RTD just kind of slips into that mode, doesn't he? I think we've not watched it yet, and we're going to review it at some point soon. I wonder if Children of Earth on second viewing is going to be one of those moments too, actually.
I kind of remember it as being that. Yeah,
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
haven't done a rewatch.
It's, I mean, it's Torchwood, so it's a slightly different thing, and I guess we'll have
Yeah.
that conversation when we've watched it and when we
The
review it.
ending, I think the ending, particularly if you're a parent, it does hit.
Yeah. Well, I
But
wasn't at the time, and I am now, so I wonder if I'll
Yeah,
see it in
I
a very
barely
different
was.
way.
So
But
yeah,
again, it's the absence of the Doctor. So, but it's supposed to be the absence of the Doctor. So
yes,
there's, in a sense, Saywood's fine as a writer, but he's just not good at writing Doctor Who stories because he doesn't like the idea of there being a magic character who can save people.
Yeah.
He wants to see people die, and there's nothing wrong, I think, with a
Well, that's
story
it.
where people die,
Yeah.
so long as it's pitched to the right people, so long as it's adults watching it, it's appropriate for adults.
Well, The Waters of Mars, that's a fine ending for a different story.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
the wrong ending for this
Yeah.
story, this
Yeah.
series, and that's the problem. I think that's us basically done, though, unless anybody's got any other points they want to bring up
Only
about
that I
this.
think that the problems that we've highlighted demonstrate how well generally Russell T Davies. I mean, he did what, 5 years,
Yeah,
5 years,
yeah.
and he consistently went up to the line, and it's a struggle to find occurrences where he went over the line.
Well, and to be honest,
Absolutely.
part of that
No,
is
it's-
because for 5 years and since, but for 5 years, and this was the first time it had really been true, give or take things like, the Andrew Cartmel era, but for 5 years, Doctor Who was about something. A lot of the times, especially in the classic era, when they're making so much of it, and it's a lot of the time it's just entertainment. But almost all of the episodes in Doctor Who's time, there's kind of a moral dilemma or something that reflects something in the world around us that becomes a point that story's about. This story's about this thing that you in the audience will recognize, and that this teenage girl who's the lead character is going through. And so, yeah, it has to address a lot of things in order to be relevant and in order to have value. And every now and again, it just takes that weird step where it steps
yeah.
totally in the wrong direction
I
with
think
it.
it would be a mistake to underestimate the influence of Julie Gardner as well, because though she was co-executive producer with Russell, but she was sort of his boss as well because
Yeah,
she
yeah.
was
It's
head of
second voice for
drama
him to
British
listen
World,
to.
wasn't
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely she was. Absolutely. And a very experienced uh, TV executive who knew exactly what she was doing. And if there had been something that wasn't right, she would have stepped in straight away. And apart from the occasions where she missed it, obviously, that
Well,
would
obviously, yeah.
and I
But
think
that's
the
what I
other
mean. I think
thing,
she was the one of the ones who was high on the success and thought Russell T Davies
yeah,
could do no wrong.
yeah.
And yeah,
and I think a lot of it as well is that Russell T Davies has a good sense of what works in a time slot for TV. He knows exactly where he's pitching it in a way that, to go back to that, Eric Saywood didn't. And
No.
And also, it's to do with the character, the position of the Doctor in these stories. So, from the moment Doctor Who came back in 2005, the Doctor, the character of the Doctor, the actor playing him, her, have been absolutely central in most scenes. And even when you sideline the Doctor, there's still kind of the doctorishness. So, human nature, there's still a doctorishness on the edge. Where it fell down is when you try to give the actor playing the Doctor the gift of going slightly deeper or being a little bit more intense or going a little bit darker. And that's the point where you run the risk of losing the tone. But
Well,
but
it's
you
and
still
that's
want to, yeah,
absolutely
you still want to
central.
give your actor some meat, but
But
Well,
then,
that's a
yeah,
great
not the
moment
character.
at which to stop and say next time we'll be talking about Stephen Moffat and Peter Capaldi, of course,
Mm.
because I think Stephen Moffat obviously gets into a lot of that territory, doesn't he?
Mm.
And I guess we'll talk about the rights and wrongs. And again, I've got a similar checklist to this with, I don't know, sex and morality and stuff on it again for that conversation. So we'll be back. Actually, I think I've
Just
scheduled it for a week
one thing
after this
quickly.
one. Go on.
One thing quickly, that our conversation has been, I think, entirely talking about RTD1, hasn't it? Are we saying that by the time he came back, he'd got over these things and got a
No, I
better
think there's.
idea
We'll
how
come
not
back
to?
to that one.
We're
Yeah, I
coming
think
back to that another time.
I think maybe we do because all these other things happen in between. I don't even know if there's
Okay.
a. I don't even know if there's a conversation to be had about Chris Chibnall. Although I suppose we probably ought to. I think there are some issues in Chris Chibnall, but I think the Chris Chibnall era is defined by having the best intentions and sometimes not quite living up to them. And I
See,
think
that's the conversation. Is there's lots of issues, but they all seem to be slightly accidental or not to
yeah,
do with
yeah.
the script or
Yeah.
to do with things being cut out or the direction
Or things like Kablam, I suppose, where
or
you say,
Yeah, Kablam was tricky,
orphan,
yeah.
whatever it was.
It's a function of production, but getting Doctor Who on
Yeah.
screen, certainly that heat of production thing in general.
but I guess
Yeah.
maybe we do Moffat as an episode, and then we'll see if we do Chibnall in half an hour. Maybe we carry on and do RTD2 in the same
I think
episode.
so.
We'll see. But we will be back to do Moffat next time in these. Until that happens, I was JR,
I was John.
I was Matt.
And I was Steve.
and we will speak again soon. And if you're still watching at the end of the video, bye bye.